Hello, welcome to the Sports Philanthropy Podcast. I am your host, Roy Kessel, and today we are very excited to have with us Science of Sport, and going to be represented by Daren Heaton, who is the Executive Director, and by Carly Stevens, who is a Business Development and Outreach Coordinator. Daren and Carly, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us, Roy.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
We're excited to have both of you with us today. I know that you're doing some really interesting things involving STEM and science. And I think before we dive into all of that, I want to have each of you give us a little bit of your background for our listeners so they know how you got into this kind of work. So why don't we start with Daren and then we'll go down to Carly.
Yeah, sure, Roy. So my background is I used to work with the Arizona Diamondbacks. Did that in the sales department for a number of years. Also worked for the LA Galaxy. And it wasn't until about 2012 until we realized we were struggling with partnering with local schools at the Diamondbacks. And really it was only looked at as an entertainment aspect. And so our goal was, how do we bridge that gap to be able to provide some educational value using the sport? And when we were strategizing on how we can do that, we partnered with a local University of Arizona professor who is the founder of Science of Sport, Dr. Ricardo Valerdi. And when we did that, we had a lot of success with the Diamondbacks, that the nonprofit was started. And, ever since been able to expand to multiple sports. And now we're across the country. And I live in Los Angeles and, mainly kind of just help run and facilitate all these different programs that we have, whether they're in partnership with different professional sports teams or school districts or foundations, to really bring math and science to life to help kids learn using real world examples that are focused around the sport.
Well, it sounds like you've got some great background and experience from the sports business side of things. I know that that's often a challenge for nonprofits that are trying to create partnerships with sports organizations, is not having that working knowledge of the sports business world. And we'll jump down to Carly, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about how you're integrating that experience.
So I am originally from Chicago. I grew up playing soccer, and I went to Loyola University Chicago on a soccer scholarship, and I majored in sport management and graduated in 2015. I then started working for Paragon Marketing Group. It's a sports marketing agency in Chicago, and I helped kind of internally deal with all the paperwork and stuff like that, and I kind of learned the ins and outs of sports business. And I also interned at the Chicago Sky, which is a WNBA team in Chicago. So I kind of got both sides of the sports industry, and I moved to LA about 2 years ago. And I met Daren last year and started talking with him because I saw all the cool stuff Science of Sport was doing here in LA and all around the country. And I thought it was a great opportunity to work for a nonprofit that is interested in sports and learning about STEM and connecting it, since soccer has been a big part of my life and sports in general. So I thought it was a cool opportunity to come aboard and help, spread the word and partner with different schools and sports organizations all around the country to help bring about this programming and provide all these educational tools for teachers and students to use. So I'm happy to be a part of the team and excited to talk more about it.
I think that the strong sports background and as I said, both of you having that business background is really important. So give us a little bit of an overview now of the Science and Sport and how that came to be in existence, Daren, and then how you came over from the business side of things into the nonprofit world.
Yeah, well, first, my mom was a teacher, and I've always been passionate about, education as a whole and just, seeing her experiences. And so it's always been at the forefront and a passion for me. And just as I was on the team side, we were, planning these massive field trips and, putting out these career days and having the students come to these one-off events, and as I mentioned, like, it was missing something was missing there. The educational piece to actually use all of these awesome topics that are within every sport, but more specifically baseball and softball. And so from the business side, we were able to capitalize on that and develop a really cool program to tie in some of the sponsors on the team to provide some activation components for them. So from the corporate sales side, you have a number of different brands that are looking for unique ways to get their messaging out, to get their branding out. And you can only have so much wall space out on the outfield wall. And so they're really looking for some unique opportunities like this to be able to tie their name to a program that's impactful. It's helping kids learn in the classroom, and it's a fun opportunity to be involved with on the corporate side. So did that, had a lot of success, and just kind of saw the trend of how it could be really something that is going to have a lasting impact that could be rolled out to multiple different areas, not just Arizona. It's every state, every community that has this issue of how are we getting kids interested in STEM, in hopes that they're going to be interested in STEM careers down the road. So the workforce issue there was a hot topic as well. And so as it kind of transpires to where we are today, the strategy is similar, but the programming implementation that we have is unique and has ever evolving, considering the landscape that we're all in now. But we have a number of different in-person events that focus on professional developments for schools or after school programs. And we do a lot of direct services to students. So that can come in the form of, one-day camps or extended week camps, after school programs. We're also developing an educational app. It's called STEMadium. That will be finished in a couple months. And we've been quickly able to shift, given COVID-19 of everything here, and making virtual STEM camps accessible to everyone throughout the country, in hopes that parents can get a little break from their kids and not have to be teachers during the day. So a lot of different unique programs that we offer, and really the same mindset is like, we have this content, we have this awesome STEM content that focuses on interesting topics that kids want to learn about. So we're just using it a bunch of different ways.
I think what makes that interesting is I know, I look at myself when I grew up, and my only interest was playing as much sports as I could all the time. School was kind of like, yeah, I got to go to school. But if you could have put something in the context of learning these types of concepts through sports, I would have been much more engaged. I actually was fine with math and science. I probably did better on that side than on the English and writing and reading side. But from a STEM side, I think there's a lot more engagement if you're putting it in context. One of the struggles I always see on the education front in general is the fact that so much of the theory is divorced from the context in which it actually applies to real life and into the world. And when you look at kind of the historical ways that math and science concepts have been taught, right, they're really outside of where they're utilized in today's world, with an emphasis, especially in sports, on analytics as well. Right, there's a lot of opportunities to do that. So tell us a little bit more about how it got started. I know you mentioned Ricardo, and tell us a little bit about what led him to launch the organization.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I was on the team side, and I was doing something that was trying to get, student schools to partner more strategically with the team. And Ricardo was essentially doing the same thing at the university, where he was putting on some camps to help kids get interested in STEM using baseball. And, again, as a engineering professor, he looks at it from a different lens. Really, how do they get kids interested in the STEM workforce, STEM degrees, STEM careers, really all the above. And Ricardo was he was at MIT for a little bit, and obviously, Moneyball comes to mind. And he had read the book, and he was looking at it from the analytics side and really being able to use the numbers to help kids learn about math. And I think that approach right there alone, now when you talk about baseball statistics and all of the data that we're able to use to our advantage, it's public knowledge. It's accessible, through so many different platforms for us. And, we should be using that to get kids interested and help them learn about math and science.
You've really seen a big shift when you talk about the analytics side in every sport. Obviously, Moneyball was the first time that was heavily, publicized in terms of an organization doing that and using that as a foundation. You look now at the NFL and how coaches are making decisions on what they should do. All kinds of things that went against typically the quote unquote historical best judgment of what you should do in a certain down and distance, to now looking at what impact that has on your ability to get a first down and win a game.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't matter what sport it is nowadays. I mean, you could really look at it for anyone. I mean, basketball is another one where they've really spent a lot of effort into looking at the numbers and the different parts of the court in which their shooting percentages are the highest. That's something that we've been using a little bit within our programs to help kids understand shooting percentages too. So always kind of relating it back to like stuff that all three of us really enjoy, and anyone that's interested in sports enjoys. Think about it in the context of a kid. Like, absolutely, it's something that they're going to be more gravitated to, especially if you're tying in the sport side to help them learn about math. So every sport has it now, though, and I think baseball is unique even right now. Just considering everything, you're going to find a lot of more teams that are going to be looking at it with that mindset of how do they maximize their dollars. Everyone's kind of on a budget at this point, until we get back into playing some games. And I think that's something that a lot of these baseball operations staffs are going to be taking looks at to try to maximize the dollars that they have to spend on players.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because the dollars right now, really for the dollars for the players, don't become a big issue in a lot of these cases. You end up with salary caps and they play the numbers in the games. But what's funny is that the real dollars sort of, it looks like nobody cares about, right? So the owners will pay way above the salary caps. They'll pay signing bonuses. They'll do all kinds of things to manipulate the structures to fit under the cap and be permissible. And they're really not paying, I'm sure they are paying attention, but it doesn't seem like the actual dollars fit that much into the equation of what they're doing. It's going to be interesting to follow coming out of this, where there's been such big and deep cuts during the COVID crisis in terms of how they approach that, because they've got such substantial expenses and staff and everything else that have been furloughed and laid off that are going to need to be taken care of. And that's got to, at some point, no matter how deep the pot of money is, there's still going to be a shortage down the road.
Yeah, I think that, everyone always looks at, the sports teams, they have so much money, but at the end of the day, I think that, it's a different pot of money when you look at like the staff members that are working on the front office, the boots on the ground every day, whether that's the part-time staff or the sales staffs or the community outreach staffs. I think that those different departments, it's tricky, it's hard, especially during this time. And so just kind of going back to business model, the more strategic, those departments can be during this time, the better they're going to be set for in the future once we get out of this, if they're being more strategic during this time to come up with some creative strategies.
So as you look at the programming that you've developed now, tell everybody how long the organization has been around and really what ages you target for the programming.
Yeah, Science of Sport has been around since 2013. We mainly focus on 3rd through 8th grade. We've done high school programs, and AKA Ricardo, teaches a online baseball statistics class at U of A. And so we have a very broad range of students, and we can use similar topics, but scale the topic based off of the educational standard that's tied into it. So like, a 3rd grader, maybe they're just learning about, the area, or 4th grader, they're learning about the area of the field and understanding what those player positions are. But maybe a 5th, 6th grader is focused on plotting those positions on an XY coordinate. So, we like to focus on 3rd through 8th grade because we think that's the most important time to introduce these topics to kids.
And then you talked about scaling it to the education of the age level, age appropriate, grade appropriate concepts. How is the program actually delivered to the kids? How do they participate?
Yeah, so our delivery models are rolled out a couple different ways. Once we have developed a curriculum, and we customize that curriculum depending on what state we're in, because some states are using Common Core and some are not. But we really need to develop that curriculum to make sure that it fits in line with the school's pacing plan and the standards that they're learning. But the programming that we focus on are teacher workshops. So those could be done in person or virtually. Wednesday, we just did a virtual teacher workshop where we had close to 50 teachers join us, and we trained them on the Diamondback Science of Baseball program. And that was the first virtual one, but typically when we do it in person, we're able to do it at the stadium, and we provide every teacher with the curriculum and a kit. What's unique about our programs is it's entirely free for anyone that is participating in it. So we seek out that fundraising on the front end to ensure that the communities that are in need are getting this type of programming. And so they get a bunch of stuff and a lot of really cool materials that relate to the sport, but also some classroom materials that are needed. And so they're able to take this stuff back to their classroom and start to use. And that's our most prominent, I think, programming that we offer. And then we tie in a lot of events that supplement that. They can come back to field trips at the stadium where we have players involved. We can put extended camps together at some of these different facilities. We partner with MLB youth academies to provide unique 5-week summer camps. Really scales, could be 2 weeks, whatever fits best for their facility. But that's awesome because every day the kids are learning a different educational topic, and they're learning a player development topic. So we're hoping to help them academically and athletically.
Well, what I'm interested to hear about, I know we've spent a lot of time talking about some of the baseball modules. What other sports are you guys working with at this time?
We have 10 different sports. So baseball is our bread and butter, but we do basketball, football, soccer, golf, tennis, track and field, volleyball, gymnastics. I think that's just about it.
So it's got a pretty diverse group of sports. So really any organization that's running programs in that sport could work with you to bring that program into their whether it's their summer camp or after school program or anything like that.
Exactly. I think gender equity is important to have a broad range of sports that are applicable to, not just boys, but girls as well. And, we focus a lot on play equity as well to ensure that these programs are accessible to everyone.
The other than baseball, because it sounds like that's far and away the number one, what do you see as the next couple sports that have been getting the most interest?
We've been able to build some steam with basketball teams and MLS teams. And I think that is a great opportunity for us, especially on the basketball front. There's a lot of information out there, as I mentioned earlier, that we could use to our advantage, and it really aligns well with STEM education as a whole. So you have some unique science topics that you can think about when shooting a basketball, and air pressure within a basketball, and the math component from the statistical side is there. There's so much data out there that we can use, and basketball players are giants. You can naturally just start to analyze them a little bit with their wingspan. So that's another fun topic that we're able to do. But this past year is when we first started to develop Olympic sports, and our goal is really the Olympic sport model is 2028 is when the Olympics are going to be here. Not sure how that's going to change with everything, with Tokyo being pushed back a year, but our goal is to be, that's good. Our goal is that we're able to roll out these programs in LA here in partnership with a foundation called the LA84 Foundation, to be able to continue to put out Olympic curriculum leading up to the games in 2028. So lots of opportunities out there.
So Carly, as a soccer player, then, as you look at the curriculum from a soccer perspective, give us a few examples of what kinds of things you're teaching on the soccer front.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I love talking about soccer. I could talk about it all day, every day. So it makes my job a lot easier. But we're unique because Daren is a former baseball player and he comes from a sales background. Ricardo is an engineering professor, and then I'm a former player and coach. So I kind of look at our soccer curriculum from a coaching perspective. I deal a lot with the age range that we deal with, which is 3rd through 8th grade. So I'm coaching young girls who are just developing, how to play and learning. And I actually use some of our, lessons in my practices and try to teach them, the proper angle of how to kick a ball, or what parts of the goal do you kick the ball in, or what's the area of the soccer goal, what's the 18-yard box. It's funny because when I ask, how big's the 18-yard box, they don't know, even though I just said the answer kind of in the question. So we talk about penalty kicks, where how far away is a penalty kick. These kids don't think about these things when they're playing. I didn't. And it's fun just looking at our curriculum and learning soccer from a different perspective. And I go to a lot of our soccer trainings and look at our curriculum, and it's fun just interacting with teachers who are also coaches a lot of the time at the schools. So they'll ask me questions about coaching, and then I say, here's a fun game that you can connect math and science, the topic and lesson we're working on, and here's how you connect it in, gym class or at, a soccer practice. So it's really fun just connecting with those teachers and students and seeing, the results of that.
Yeah, it's always fun to see the eyes light up as things start to make sense, right? Because we talk about things that we've experienced hundreds and hundreds of times. If you think about how many times you ran into the penalty area, right, over your course of playing soccer, it just becomes ingrained. The 6-yard box, the 18-yard box, penalty spot. You kind of know what it is. If you're in baseball, the angles on where you need to line up your fielders and things like that. And I think until more of the analytics now, where you see people taking very untraditional fielder placement because the analytics for particular hitters might be so out of whack in terms of where they hit the ball that you can't just put people in the same normal spot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we talk about hitter tendencies quite a bit, and allow students to do some research to try to figure out like certain matchups. You know, if a certain pitcher is throwing, you know, who would win that matchup, and like where are their trends at. So there's a public website out there that we use pretty frequently. Two of them. One of them is called brookbaseball.net, and you have a bunch of really cool ways to analyze that player through spray charts or heat maps. So it will date back to when they very first started in MLB. And so you can literally go and see every single home run they've hit in their career, like what pitch was thrown, what was the speed, what was the launch angle on their home run. So that's a really cool one. And then as we talk about the statistics side of, you know, the analytics of baseball/reference is another really cool one, where fans, students, anyone can go and analyze a player's stats throughout the year as it relates to their batting average and home runs, really anything.
And I think the data and the metrics are incredible. What's coming out now in baseball, in basketball, in football. I've said for years, I grew up playing soccer in Madison, Wisconsin from before I was 8, you know, and that at that point, U8 was young. My son started playing before he was 4, you know, because he didn't start doing travel until he was like 9 or 10. He was too far behind because he hadn't started doing travel at like 7. You know, it's kind of gotten crazy. But I always said that I felt that one of the reasons soccer has had such a hard time getting a foothold in the US for as long as it has is because it doesn't have the same amount of data and statistics that you can really track in the same way that you can in many of these other sports. When you take all of the numbers in soccer, certainly there's things you can break down, right? And, you know, all kinds of numbers now that can be measured in terms of how fast somebody's running and how many yards they've run over the course of the game and all kinds of interesting things. But historically, right, you could go and look at a box score of a baseball game and you didn't have to be there. You could have a pretty good feel about the way that game went, the flow of the game, just from a box score. You know, you can't look at a box score in a sport like hockey or soccer and really feel like, oh yeah, I pretty much know what happened in that game. And I think that was something that's been a setback, obviously from a participation level, in a safety level, soccer's way ahead of some of the other sports. And I think that's what we're seeing now is coming on. But how do you see the growth of analytics in some of those, we'll call them non-traditionally analytic sports like hockey and soccer?
Well, wearable technology has been extremely helpful for soccer, I know, to help track some of the analytics as it relates to, you know, their heart rate and how many miles they're running over a course of a game. But I don't know if Carly has any input on certain analytics to track other stats for soccer players.
Yeah, it's funny, Roy. I mean, I love everything you're saying because soccer is the #1 sport in the world, and it doesn't require many, you know, materials or equipment to make it happen. And it's funny that it hasn't really translated in the US, that it has worldwide. So youth soccer especially is crazy now because there's so many different rules for all the age groups. Parents are, you know, worried about concussions. You can't head in soccer, use your head until 12. But there's, you know, just so many regulations now. And actually with soccer coaching, you have to get your licenses. I don't know if people knew that. Other sports, you don't. So there's a lot of regulation in that sense. But, you know, technology now is ever changing. And you could see with the World Cups, they're using the goal line technology, using offside technology. And I actually think, I like traditional soccer where if the ref calls it, it's a foul. If he doesn't or she, then, just keep moving forward. But I think goal line technology has changed soccer forever. And the fact that refs have to go back and now check to see if it was a goal or not, and they have to stop play. And now, in practices, a lot of I used to do as well, where some kind of heart rate monitor or something on your chest where they track how many calories you burned, what's the distance that you ran. And they and actually basketball players do that too in football. And you can kind of translate that back into, okay, they should only, practice for 30 minutes, or how much they sweat, how much water should you drink. So a lot of our lessons go over hydration and nutrition and like staying active, and technology, has helped, underline some of those things that we didn't know before. So I think technology is going to keep getting better and better.
I think there's no question that for health and safety, that the technology we're talking about and the wearables are really something that's going to make a big difference for all of the sports.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that soccer's come a long way. I mean, they're doing things much better now than they were 10 years ago. And I think that, as it relates to why, it's maybe been behind some of the other sports, there's just so many different factors that go into it. A couple that come to my mind, at least, it's not something that had been easily accessible on TV, really. And luckily, they've been able to come up with a new agreement to be able to have the MLS be shown, throughout the nation, and a much better TV contract. And also there was a struggle to build fans at a young age. And part of the issue too with that is that club soccer is expensive, and it kind of restricted some of the students from kids from playing the sport. And so they're starting to figure it out now. And I think that, we're going to start to see some really talented soccer players that are coming from the U.S., in the next couple of years.
Yeah,
if you look at the youth teams coming up, I mean, there's some incredible talent coming up. And I know watching my son play in some of his leagues, I think he was probably 10 or 11, and you're watching some of these kids play, and the struggle is that the travel teams are selling as many slots as they can sell, and not inexpensive to play. So in suburban Chicago, they can get a lot of kids and create that competition, but you've got a lot of parents paying to put their kids in the program just because they want their kids affiliated with a certain program, even when they're not really at the talent level that should be there. But I think what you're going to see is that more and more athletes that are what I'll classify as elite level athletes are taking to soccer, because there are more opportunities down the road in soccer. It's not, in a sense, as it had been when I was growing up, almost like a dead end sport. Like, okay, maybe you can go play in college, but you're not going to the Premier League from high school in Madison or Chicago. So I know Carly had something she wanted to jump in on.
Oh yeah, sorry to interrupt you. I was just gonna say the access to sports now is, a lot different. Like you said, the travel programs, it's so expensive to put your kids into these programs. And I don't know why sports has become, if you have money, you can, have access to elite fields and elite coaches and elite training, and it should be free and, for everybody. So that's why kind of our program, we bring sports for free to areas where they necessarily don't have, those resources. And I'm a coach, and Daren has playing experience. So like we provide unique perspectives. We also provide educational tools like math and science and STEM concepts, because a lot of people just see a soccer game or baseball game and they don't realize everything that went into that game. All, the schedules and the salaries and stadium design. And we talk about that because we want kids, to be involved in sports, not just as a professional player. I think that's a myth for kids. They just think they have to be a pro and professional to be into sports when there's so many more opportunities and STEM opportunities where they can do these things. And you don't have to be great at soccer to play soccer, but you can learn math and science while you're playing. And we want to connect that back to, oh, I'm watching a soccer game. Oh, they're taking a penalty kick. Oh, that's 8 yards from, you know, the goal line, and connecting those concepts together. So that's kind of our main mission.
Yeah, I think when you look, what's really interesting about that is this conversation, we've really touched on the three main initiatives that we have at the Sports Philanthropy Network. So one is health and safety, and you talked about the wearables and everything like that. The second one is access. You talk about the cost, you talk about the geographic location, about equipment, about everything else that's going on. And then the third is really the, you know, the DEI, the diversity, equality, and inclusion types of things, where there's so many kids and so many groups that aren't getting the same caliber of coaching. I'm personally not convinced that all of the travel teams and the coaches that they provide are necessarily better than some of the others, but I know soccer, I think, is light years ahead of most of the other sports in terms of the organizational infrastructure. I was at the soccer coaches convention in Baltimore earlier this year, and we're covering that. And it was incredible to see the number of professional development programs and workshops and speakers. And I had literally come the day before from the American Football Coaches Association, and it was night and day in terms of the types of programs. And as you said, Carly, the certifications that are required to be a coach. On the football side, everything was X's and O's, you know, and maybe there was a few token sessions on anything else. And at the United Soccer Coaches, it was probably 80% the other way around.
Great. I mean, one last point I just want to mention about the students component, and it's really that the education should be at the forefront for everything. And when you look at these professional athletes, they're not playing for 30, 40 years. They need to be able to fall back on an education. And we want to make sure to reiterate that point. When you're a great athlete, absolutely take advantage and ride that out as far as you possibly can, but understand your education matters. And it's important to focus on these sort of topics at a young age, and even, you know, past your professional athlete career.
Yeah, there's no doubt that the player development issues from a opportunity of what are you going to do when you're done playing sports, right? The NCAA is outspoken about, right, almost everybody is going to go pro in something other than sports. A lot of the pro leagues have player development programs and departments to try to encourage their athletes to finish their educations or continue their educations, as the case may be. And it's difficult because from an athlete perspective, you've got to take advantage of that limited window to capitalize on your athletic ability, because that's a very short amount of time that's accessible. At the same time, you do have an opportunity to do things while you're playing college and professional sports, and you have access to people that you're not going to get access to the day after you're cut. You know, and I always say, you know, I look around here in Chicago. I live just a few miles from Hallis Hall, where the Bears have their headquarters. You send a Bear player to a school around here, right? As far as all the kids in elementary school know, that player is a Bear player. They could be the backup guard that doesn't ever get on the field, but they had a Bear player come to their school. If that same guy tries to do anything in September when he just got cut in training camp in August, people would be like, "You're who? I never heard of you." And so it's something that you really try and integrate, and talk to a lot of professional athletes over the years. I was an NFL agent, and it was something that we try to counsel the players. Like, you really have to prepare yourself for life after you're done playing sports. You don't know when it's going to be, especially in football, but in any sport, you don't know. In baseball, when you're going to tear a rotator cuff or something in your elbow, and you're going to have a hard time. You know, ACLs in every sport make it difficult to really get back to that elite level. So I think that that's definitely a service, and there's definitely ways to integrate that as well. I want to thank both of you for coming on today. Before I let you go, I'm going to put you each on the spot. We're going to use our sports philanthropy superpowers. We'll start with Daren here, and we're going to make you the commissioner of baseball. And I want to see what you would change in baseball.
I just would like to, what would we like to change in baseball?
Correct.
Okay. I was about to answer something else about when we're going to be starting baseball. I would like
maybe
to...
that's the change you want to see. You want to get it going and just have everybody start playing right now. Sequester them at the Phoenician and just run it all off of spring training.
Yeah, I mean, since it's such a hot topic, I feel like I should mention that. And, you know, I think one thing that everyone forgets about is these players are people, and they have families and they have kids. And to assume that they're just going to leave their families behind for an extended period, it's got to be challenging. So I understand that. But I think the idea is be able to leverage Arizona, Florida, and Texas seems like a good alternative right now. And I think, you know, that's the best we can do. We all have to adapt, and we all have to, you know, pivot. And I think that's a good strategy to get our baseball fix as fast as possible.
Great. All right, Carly, it's your turn. We're going to put you in charge of FIFA and tell us what you're going to do there.
Oh, where do I start with FIFA? I think first and foremost that women need to be more prominent in soccer, and their salaries need to be raised, and we need to see more women coaches, both in men and women's soccer, and also maybe just make the sport more affordable to the youth. And I think FIFA needs to do a better job of kind of bringing soccer to those underprivileged areas at a lower rate. So those are kind of some of the things I would do.
Yeah, and I always laugh at the concepts of FIFA. If you took all of the bribe money that's been paid to bring the World Cup and invested that money into youth soccer in the communities that were paying those bribes or where those people were from, like, right, that's fine. I'll take the bribe money, but, you know, let's put it into youth soccer. It would have done incredible things. It's going to be interesting to see because the whole U.S. bid for 2026. And, you know, it should have been in the U.S. in 2022. I'm not sure how they're going to end up getting that sorted out in time for a proper World Cup in Qatar. So, again, thank you both for coming on. I appreciate your time. Very interesting work that you're doing, and we look forward to collaborating with you further.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Appreciate the time. Nice chatting with you.
Yeah, and I just wanted one more point. I just want to thank like all our students and teachers that are involved in our programming, and they can learn more if they go to our website, www.sciencesport.org, and we have our social media channels, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. So check us out, Science of Sport.
You'll have all of that stuff linked and attached from the page for the podcast. We'll have everything listed there and sent out. And we appreciate our listeners for being with us, and we hope you'll join in for our next episode of the Sports Philanthropy Podcast.